Evening, everybody. Can you all hear me? I see waves, so you must be able to hear me.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening for another meeting of the Rules, Courts, and Civil Service Committee to discuss the rules changes or rule clarifications that were proposed and drafted by our Law Director, Bill Bartos. Mr. Bartos, are you on the call? You may be muted. Hello?
I'm not sure if Bill made it on. He's still dealing with his illness. He is the chief counsel, of course. This is Law Director Justin Richard.
I'm sorry, that's correct. Okay. Are you able to stand in his stead then, Mr. Richard?
I'll do my best.
Okay. All right, so I know we had one change mentioned to the, hang on one second. We had a change that was excuse me 1 minute, because if I don't mute, you're not going to be able to hear me because of my dogs barking in the background. So just 1 second, please. Okay, I apologize for that. I was saying that we had some suggestions to word changing on the original draft by Mr. Bartos regarding the number of or the presence or the existence of a vice chairperson. I believe that's where we ended up with our discussion. Anybody have any questions or anything else to discuss on that point?
Councilperson Gregg, if at the end, if there are no other discussion, I'd like to at least verbally submit how I reworked Rule 18 as it stands. I'm looking at, of course, the dated November 24th draft council rules and revisions regarding standing committee assignments. So I'll be referring to that.
All right. Do you want to go ahead with that?
Sure, absolutely. Obviously, what you just said, we are taking out the vice chairperson language. And in order to make it read consistently, Mr. Bartos put the fourth word in is shall. So certainly shall in legal in legislation is a big deal. So what we need to do is, because that is shall consist of chairperson, taking out vice chairperson, and one additional member. So it should read in 2 additional members.
Okay.
That's what I have as of right now. And then I also want to take out the continuing on. It says each member of council shall be responsible for serving as the chairperson I'm taking out at least, because what we're doing, we're making a finite number when we say shall consist, when we're speaking of the consistency. So at least is taken out. So of one standing committee and sitting on, take out at least again, and then two other standing committees.
If we take out the at least on one standing committee for the chairperson, then we'll have an issue with what the rules or the changes that were just made, where we've got Councilperson Mark Lombardi on as chairperson of two committees, at least temporarily.
You're absolutely right. So if that's not a change you want to make, we can certainly do that. If you would like to leave that, if everyone agrees that that language at least in, otherwise there would just be a vacancy until that time that it could be filled. So I'm certainly, none of the changes that we're making to this rule obviously will probably take place until after that seat is filled anyway, but I would agree.
Okay, thoughts by members of the Rules and Courts Committee?
Mr. Gregg, Mr. Hernkane. Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
I don't have a problem with the at least part. I mean, this is, for the most part, on any given year, we're going to have 9 seated members of council. I think vacancies come up so infrequently that, every so often we may have an issue where somebody may need to serve on more than 2 or chair 2 for a temporary time. I guess I just don't see, I don't have a problem with the at least 1 committee chair and at least 2 committees that a person serves on. I just don't think it's that big of a deal, and frankly comes up too often that it's worth changing. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Hernkane. Mrs. Sterrett, do you have comments or thoughts?
I'm still thinking. Let me get back on that.
Okay. I agree. I think I agree with Mr. Hernkane that I don't have a problem with the at least because, as you said, we don't frequently have vacancies in those positions, and when we do, I think we are structured that we can handle business without needing to necessarily have that vacancy filled by, at least through this method.
So then all we have to do is, as opposed to taking out the at least at the 2 bottom, right after where it says vice chairperson, then we put in the words at least 2 additional members.
Right.
Mr. Gregg, I would agree. I don't think it's something that's necessary. And like Mr. Hernkane said, it's rare that this issue comes up. And when it does, it's for a short, finite period. So it's always something that's going to be resolved by the nature of the appointment.
Okay.
I certainly, I mean, I am obviously not interjecting my opinion. I just am saying that we either need to take away 2 at least or add 1. So it's entirely up to you all.
I think we go with the leaving it as as you just said, replacing the at least, the wording with at least where we don't have it currently.
Sure, at the composition, absolutely, you got it.
Okay. Any comments or questions from other council from this point? All right, I think we're unanimous on that one. So Rule 18.1, were there comments, questions, concerns on the wording on this particular one?
Mr. Gregg?
Who is that?
Yeah, it's Ed. Can you share your screen again? Because I still have yet to receive a copy of these changes.
Sure. I think I can. Oh, there we go.
Councilman Gregg?
Yes, Mr. Richard.
would you please ask who all on council would like a copy of it? And I have it brought up right now. I can forward it to all of them immediately if they can get into their emails.
Okay. So I see Mr. Councilman Barrett, Councilman Lombardi.
I would, Ed.
Councilman Lewis. Councilwoman Creamer, do you have a copy or do you wish to have a copy?
I already have a copy, thank you.
Councilman Lippman.
I have a copy as well. Thank you, Mr. Gregg.
Okay. So I think that's it, Mr. Richard.
Councilman Gregg, would you go over that again? I obviously have Councilman Lewis. Did you also say Councilman Barrett?
And yes, Councilman Barrett and Councilman Lombardi. The others have a copy. And I can share it from my screen as well.
All right, I will send it as soon as I can pull it up.
All right, there, I believe I'm sharing that document. Can everyone see it? Can anyone see it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
able to see it as well.
All right. All right, so back to Rule 18.1, no later than the first regular meeting succeeding the organization of council. In each term, the president of council shall present an assignment of standing committees for council's consideration. Council shall approve or reject the president of council's assignment of standing committees by a motion duly seconded and with the concurrence of an affirmative majority vote of all members of council. Comments, questions?
Mr. Gregg, Ms. Sterrett.
ahead, Ms.
I
Sterrett.
brought up last meeting the concern of having some, I don't know how, I know there were some issues on how we word this or how we do it, having some requirement of submitting a list early of committees, et cetera. As we saw, even at the last meeting, there was confusion as to who was getting appointed where and what the motion was and how it would look, basically, when we're just kind of saying it. So, my thought process was have some requirement of a requested assignment list to be required to be given to council members ahead of time, almost in the same way that we request legislation to be presented to council members ahead of time. So we are, I guess, up to speed when it comes to a meeting on the possibilities before we have to just vote on something on the fly. I mean, we're not required to vote on anything else without seeing it beforehand. And I just feel that it is a little more appropriate, I guess, in a way, since, I don't know. I think there's something that needs to be tweaked there, but that's just my opinion.
Councilman
agree.
Gregg,
Yes, who's this?
this is Diane, Council Clerk Rowland,
Yes.
and I have a change that because Megan did make that statement at the last Rules and Courts meeting, we changed no later than to prior to the first regular meeting.
Where was
That
that
was
change made?
That was suggested by Chief Counsel Bartos.
Okay, I don't believe that's in any draft that we have currently.
I
Was
just
that,
have it in my notes. I just have it in my notes,
Okay.
the one that I have.
So prior to the first regular meeting succeeding the organization of council, is how you have it?
Yes, sir.
What do you think about that, Mrs. Sterrett?
I mean, I don't see an issue with it. I don't know if we want to put like a day prior, 24 hours prior, or anything like that. I mean, prior to is fine as long as it is actually provided prior to the meeting and not, at the beginning of the meeting or something like that.
Yeah. Prior to could be 5 minutes prior to, and that wouldn't really be sufficient. It would be about the same as the meeting. So I'm thinking we should wording something along the lines of like 24 hours prior to.
And I also see, I know another issue that was brought up was then all possibilities should be submitted ahead of time, which at first I was like, oh, that's a good idea. But at the same time, then, I don't want to also limit ourselves to saying like, this is A, this is B, and there's no in between, that you can't tweak it while that council can't tweak it and talk about it first. You know what I mean? Say like, you would like to be on a different committee, but you're not going to be the head of the committee, and Mr. Lombardi would like to be on the same committee, or you guys want to switch quick or something like that, that should be able to be amended in a way before we vote on it if everybody's in agreement. I don't know. I just don't know how to put it in a way that we avoid those issues. But everybody is kind of up to speed on what we're planning on voting on before we actually have to vote on it. So I guess that's why we're here at the committee meeting, if anybody else has any suggestions on how to remedy that.
Other suggestions?
Well, Mr. Gregg, this is Mr. Hernkane again.
ahead.
Yeah, I mentioned that the comment that Mrs. Sterrett's referring to, I believe I made that comment last time we met. I think if the president of council, for whatever reason, is required to submit or present the assignment of standing committees at some point prior to the time he or she is going to present it, I think all lists should be presented at that same time. I guess I'm just confused by why it's necessary to see lists ahead of time. I don't think we've ever done that before prior to this year. I'm just not sure what the rationale behind having to see these things ahead of time is at this point.
Well, you're right. I don't believe we've done it before now, but it's a change we're contemplating because of, as Mrs. Sterrett mentioned, it's how we handle regular legislation. And by having a chance as members of city council to look at that, review it, give it some thought, and perhaps come up with other suggestions or other comments. And it's difficult to do if the first time you're seeing it is in the meeting that we're going to be voting on it. So that's the rationale.
And Mr. Lewis or Ms. Creamer or even Ms. Littman could correct me if I'm wrong, because they've been on council for quite a while too. But I believe we've always been kind of given the list ahead of time to at least peruse, at least the day of, to see before we vote on it. But somebody could correct me if they don't believe that's correct.
Yeah,
I don't believe that to be
I don't-
correct.
yeah, I don't recall that happening.
Mr. Lewis, do you have comment? I know you have thoughts about this particular point. Do you have any comments for right now?
As far as the list being distributed prior to, it's always been, I think, at the discretion of the president. I've had presidents of council who have submitted it to council members prior to the meeting. And then we've seen cases where they haven't. It's so consistently in one way, no. At the discretion of whatever that president decides to do at that time, yes. I hope that helps. Regarding submitting prior to, I think Ms. Sterrett has a point as to it would be beneficial. I understand Mr. Hernkane's point to saying if you're going to make that a mandate of one, then why wouldn't you extend that to all? I guess I probably fall on the same side as Mr. Hernkane of no requirement, because if you're going to make a requirement for prior submission, then I think you run into a violation of the spirit of debate. You're essentially saying, council, you can't really debate this because you have to vote on only those choices and you're not allowed to change any of them. So the debate is very limited, and that to me isn't the spirit of what we do on council on any issue. So I guess just present them at the meeting and don't put any time allotment on any of them. That way they can be amended or changed or altered per whatever the council decides.
So we would stay with the wording not later than the first regular meeting to see the organization of council. Is that correct?
Yeah, and then not to mention, if you make 18.1 say that it has to be 24 hours or whatever before, and then you extend that to all of council members if they have an alternative possibility, then you have a conflict with 18.3, which says at any regular meeting, council may by motion, duly, whatever. Now all of a sudden you have to, 18, in order for 18.3 to be enacted, you'd also have to have a 24-hour notice. So it kind of builds some complication within itself, and most of our laws and ordinances are probably best served to be as simple as possible.
I definitely agree with that. Mr. Richard, any comments there?
That when we got to that was my next part. That obviously we needed to, if we were going to introduce a time period for submissions, that clearly it was going to conflict with what already exists. So I mean, we're really getting beyond. We're really overhauling the law. I agree with every comment that Councilman Lewis just made. As far as from a legal standpoint, yeah.
Right. All right, so members of the Rules and Courts Committee, are we okay that we just leave the wording as is, not later than the first regular meeting succeeding the organization of council?
That's fine with me.
That's fine.
All right, I agree with that. Any other thoughts or comments by other council members?
Mr. Gregg?
Mr. Lewis, go ahead.
I just have a question probably for the law director. As this is written, it says approve or reject the president's of council's assignment of standing committees. I don't have an objection per se to that, but on anything that is in front of council, even if it is a motion that is in front of council, there is, according to Robert's Rule of Order, the ability to make an amendment of said motion. Does this make it so that you can't? Does this somehow supersede Robert's Rule of Order and say you cannot amend this motion? I just don't want someone to get tripped up on a technicality later.
No, I certainly. Oh, excuse me, Councilman Gregg. May I address that?
Yes, please go ahead.
I think certainly the spirit of the amendment is, because it is specifically stated as a rule, that the rule would supersede Robert's Rules of Order, of course, are for the order of business, but they certainly don't stand alone as an enumerated law, that we use in our council rules. So I see this as taking precedent over essentially the what's a good word? The defunct, or in place of no specific rule, then we relate to Robert's Rules of Order, essentially. So I would see that just the same way that I believe that this is, that under no other circumstances can the president make, and they're suggesting something, but they're essentially proposing or making a motion for legislation, or at least for committee assignments. And, with the exception of this rule, under limited circumstances, can that be done? So I believe this is special. I do believe it does sit out and aside of those things. I don't believe it's treated as just a regular motion or council business that would be in front of council, because it specifically states at the first regular meeting succeeding the organization of council. So this is a one shot only during a 2-year period of time when this would take place. I think at any time council, the president can address others, but as far as giving special powers to submit a council assignment, I think that this is, stands alone. And then, of course, it's saying it shall either be duly seconded and or voted upon. And then certainly if it fails, I think is when 18.3 kicks in. Also a special rule.
So you're saying once the slate has been presented by the president, it needs to be voted on as it is. There's no opportunity to amend that before actually passing it or rejecting it. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. And then I believe that 18.3, after given that information of what those are, I think you could then go to, like Councilman Lewis said, to the spirit of debate and, whatever you disagreed with, clearly you made a decision whether or not to agree or disagree with it for whatever reason. I think then a new proposal can be made. And at that time, and I don't even know if it has to be made right away, if you want to take a brief recess for that reason, just to study it or to then put forth a motion. I think then, that's the heart of the legislative process is then it can be debated why this one should succeed where the other one failed.
Okay, so then the wording would stand as is in 18.1, and therefore 18.2 and 18.3, I believe, would all be the same. Is that correct?
If you'd like to discuss 18.2, I think 18.1 and 18.3 are dependent on one another. So certainly,
yeah.
I think that if you don't change 18.1, you're not changing 18.3. Certainly, all of council can discuss anything about 18.2 if you'd like.
Mr.
Go ahead.
Greg?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi here. I just wanted to point out the way 18.1 is written, the president can present their suggestions for council committees. However, there's no motion that needs to be brought forward, and that definitely violates Robert's rules there. That there's nothing mentioned in there. It just says that they can present and the council will vote. In this last year, in January, we were presented with 3 different possibilities from the president. So we'd have to vote on each one in this case, according to this rule, the way it's written.
It states, council shall approve or reject the president of council's assignment of standing committees by a motion, duly seconded, and with the concurrence of affirmative majority vote of all members of council. Is that not what you're talking about?
I apologize. I misread that. I didn't see the motion part.
Okay.
Mr. Gregg, Mr. Hernkane?
Yes, go ahead.
To Mr. Lombardi's point, 18.1 says the president of council shall present an assignment. Singular.
Right.
So I guess with what the words say what they say, as he says, if there's multiple ones submitted, we'd have to vote on them. That's the way this is. It looks like we should be presented with one assignment of standing committees.
By the president. Other members of council can present their own. President can present one.
I mean, these are all, yeah.
Okay, well, we're running out of time. I know we got to get to our normal work session. So, Mr. Richard, would the next step on this be to put this in the form of request for legislation?
Yes.
Okay. Do you need to discuss? I know we didn't give 18.2 much discussion. Do anybody see that we need to discuss that any further before we ask Mr. Richard or Mr. Bartos to put this in request for legislation form? If so, we can talk about it. I'll bring it up at the during our work session, during our time of the work session as well.
And Mr. Gregg?
Yes.
Greg, Diane speaking. I believe that request for legislation should be submitted by your committee.
Yes.
And not from the law department.
No, I'm asking that they put the wording together, submit it to me to bring forward.
Okay.
Yeah, submit to me, to our committee to bring forward. Mrs. Diane, do we need to sign out of this session, or are we continuing on with this session into the work session?
No, I'm going to end this recording and start another one. So you can just stay in the meeting. I'm just going to stop the recording for the for the rules and courts and start a new recording for the work session.
Okay, so we, members of council and others, don't need to sign out of this one.
No, sir.
All right, so as I said, for Rules and Courts Committee, I'll bring this up during our time of the work session if time allows this evening, and we can give it a little bit more discussion. But I think we're close to needing to add law department to provide the proper wording so we can bring this forward for vote. All right, that's all I have. Mr. Lewis, do you want to take over?
I'm ready when you are, Ed. You're muted, Ed.
I've said all kinds of things and you had no idea. Go ahead and take a roll of the council members, please.
Okay. All righty. Kramer,
Present.
Greg,
President.
Paul, oh, sorry. Hearn Kane,
Here.
Lewis,
Present.
Littman, I see she's on here. Lombardi,
Here.
Starrett,
Here.
and Barrett.
Present.
Roll call of 8 present.
All right. Mr. Lombardi, do you have any updates that you want to share on the technology in council chambers?
Ed, before we do that, do you want me to do city officials?
Yeah, sure.
Mayor Kathy Catazera Perry,
Good evening.
Safety Service Director Barb Sylvester,
Present.
Auditor Jane Ferraro.
Stephanie Myers is here on behalf of the auditor's office.
Thank you. Justin, are you on this call also?
Yes, ma'am, present.
Diane,
Chief
this is-
Engineer.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
couldn't
saw
get
you.
my-
I saw you. I marked you present.
Sorry, thank you.
You're welcome. Chief Engineer David Kroc or Jason Popil.
Hi, Jason is here.
Community Director Samantha Walters. Economic Developer David Maley.
Present.
Parks and Rec Steve Pedro.
Present.
Let's see. Fire Chief Bergasser. Police Chief Moser. Income Tax Budget Director Lori Katagides Boron.
Present.
And I think I saw Terry Argent on the call.
Present.
Is there anyone from administration that I might have missed? Okay, that's it, Ed.
I'm also
Okay.
present. Thank you.
I'm sorry, who was that? Oh, I'm sorry, Claudette. Yes, President
Thank you.
Eisnick.
Mr. Lombardi?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lewis. Everything is in place. I just have to put the camera installation in and run the wire over to Diane's podium station. Once that's in play, it's ready to go. And I should be able to do that, I believe, this upcoming week. I am, however, concerned with the rise in the status to purple in Stark County that we should probably maybe wait for a few weeks just to see what the COVID numbers, do. I think we should probably just stay with the format that we're on at the moment. even though we're ready to go when we can, safely go back into chambers. I believe that we should probably just stay where we're at right now and those numbers come down a bit. And that's all I have.
I'm in agreement with that, Ed. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the sentiment we shared a couple of weeks ago too, to kind of hold off, but we wanted to make sure we got this up and running for when it was time we could go instead of waiting.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Diane is running the meeting from home right now, and she said she could work from home as well if she had a printer. Is the COVID money gone? Is the deadline passed?
We would have to talk to the auditor about that. My concern would be the type of printer she would need in order to handle the volume. Could be quite costly plus service. I would think that maybe a good thought would be work from home and then just have maybe a couple hours a day that you come into the office just to print. But the rest of the time you could work from home as long as phone calls can still be forwarded somewhere so that you can answer the phone.
Diane, how does that sound to you?
That sounds good because I know that some people over in administration have their phones set up that if you dial their extension, that it would be forwarded to a number. I know Dave Maley, I've called him a couple of times and it's come up off-site. And Anita Combs, I've called her and it comes up off-site. So as long as you can forward your calls, your office calls to either your cell phone, well, that's all I have is my cell phone. I don't have a home phone. So if they could be forwarded so I could answer them that way, that would be fine.
That sounds fine with me if it can be done.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, Mr. Lombardi.
We might want to talk to our printer vendor that we use. They may be able to just even temporarily rent her something for a couple of, month or two, whatever is needed. We might want to check into that because I would imagine the cost is probably minimal for that.
Mr. Thayer.
Do we still go through like Copyco or one of those companies?
Well, I would check with BPI because they're the one that provided me with the new laptop. So I would, consult with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's something I think there's multiple levels of consideration. One would be the device or machine she would need in order to handle the load. Two would be power. I mean, how much energy does one of those use? And I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I'm always very careful when you're talking about public use of equipment that may be privately funded. Ms. Littman, you had a question?
I did, Mr. Lewis. I just wanted to confirm with Diane that she feels she is able to complete her daily tasks at home. I'm not sure all of what she has, on her agenda, but I guess I just wanted to hear confirmation from her that she feels comfortable that she can complete those duties that she's called upon to do in her home environment.
Yes, Councilwoman Littman, I can answer that for you. The only thing I'm concerned about is like after this evening, getting the request for legislation and transferring them over into ordinances. With the new laptop, I have the capability to go into previous ordinances such as the reductions and appropriations and just plug in the new numbers or the new committees or what have you for that. But still go into the office and take the laptop with me and I could do the printing there. But I would have enough work, I'm sure, to work an 8-hour shift, at least one day a week at home. But it's something that can be worked out.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Just another question I would ask is, it satisfactory to President Eisnick as well as Clerk Rowland to maybe choose a few days a week to begin working at home on a regular basis, and then see if any adjustments need to be made from there, rather than having 5 days a week go completely home and then figuring out maybe I need to use some of the equipment that remains in the office. I guess that's just a suggestion as a trial and error period.
Ed, can I speak?
Yes, Ms. Eisnick, President Eisnick.
I would give Diane the leeway to go into the office as she needed, as she saw fit, as long as she was getting her full 8 hours in. I trust her judgment, and she always gets everything done.
I guess my only thoughts are I appreciate the president inquiring of council as to our opinions, but ultimately the power rests in the president's hands. So if she finds that sufficient and she's got our input, then so it shall be.
However you want to work it, Diane, you know I've always got your back.
Okay, well, as of the next 2 weeks anyway, I've got, well, 3 weeks. I've got vacation I've got to burn. So right now, I wouldn't even worry about it till after the first of the year and see what council's going to do in the first place.
That
Are we
sounds
going
good.
back into chambers? Are we going to, still be doing remote meetings? How are we going to handle? I can honestly say, though, it feels good to be at home and not down at council chambers all by myself, since I no longer have Nancy and Mark to keep me company.
We'll address then this at the last meeting of the year.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have Steve Pedro with us this evening. He is going to go over the Parks and Rec budget. Mr. Pedro? Mr. Pedro, are you still with us?
I'm sorry, I had my phone on mute. I am here. Thank you for having me tonight. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. As Mr. Lewis said, I'm here to discuss our budget, to answer any questions that you may have. That's how we did it last year. If there's something else you would like me to do, I'll be glad to do it. But I'd like to start out that way. If you have any questions about what we're doing, I can tell you we kept our budget at a little bit lower than we would have liked to because of this year with COVID and our, I'll call it lack of attendance at our rec center. I can tell you that since July, our attendance here at the rec center has been pretty steady. It's about 30% lower than what it normally is. Things have picked up in the evenings with people working out and with our adult volleyball leagues. So as all of you know, our pool is open and by appointment only. You can play pickleball in the gym, which is that pickleball has taken off the last year and a half. And we're offering that they come in and play Monday through Friday for the most part. Their biggest days are Wednesday and Friday. We may have 30 people in here at one point on 3 courts. They usually play 4 on a court. So if you have any questions about my budget, I'd be glad to answer those right now.
Ms. Littman?
Yes, Mr. Pedro, can I ask if you have made any adjustments from last year based on the decrease in expected usage, at least through the balance of the COVID situation? I guess I'm thinking employees as well as cleaning service and so forth.
Yes, Mrs. Littman. As you know, we were our budget was recertified, and because of the lack of income coming into the rec center for the most part, and you know, we knew we were going to realize that. I think I may be wrong, but I think it's going to be a little lower than what we expected, which is a good thing. So with that being said, we cut back our spending for projects and upgrades. I didn't want to lay off people if I didn't have to. As you know, we were closed for about 12 weeks and everybody was laid off. A couple people worked from home from time to time. But when we came back to be opening on June 1st, we tried to open everything that we could safely. So a lot of our employees came back. As you know, we have 50 or 55, 60 part-time employees that work several shifts throughout the week. So we did everything we could to get those people back to work. Now, there were some people that refused to come back because of the unemployment, so we did what we had to do with them. But to get to cleaning, we closed the building. We're open from 5:30 to 8:30 every night, Monday through Thursday, till 8 o'clock on Friday, and then on Saturday, 9 to 3, Sunday, noon to 5. During the week, Monday through Friday, we closed the building every day at 2 o'clock. Through the CARES Act, we were very fortunate to receive some help with that. We have 2 handheld sprayers that after we clean, we spray everything down at 2 o'clock. And then in the evening, it take a little longer. Everything gets scrubbed down completely, and we spray those down for the evening to be ready to go the next day. Now, those sprayers and the concentrate that are in those are said to kill 99.9% of all viruses. So, we think we made a good investment. We have had compliments here at the rec center by the people that come in here, and, they've seen us cleaning and seen what we're doing. There has not been many issues here with face masks. As you all know, if someone comes in and says they can't wear a face mask for a medical condition, we're not allowed to ask them any questions. We do have a couple of people that have come in with that. Right now, we're not open to kids. It's adults only. So we don't have that issue, and our child care remains closed. So we are putting a great effort towards keeping the building clean and trying to keep our staff and our patrons safe, to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pedro.
Mr. Pedro, what projects are you intending to address in 2021 for parks?
Okay, our pool has been kind of our kiddie pool has been a little bit of a thorn in our side. That we put it out to bid. 2 bids came in. One was way over what we had set the amount for, and they had everything in line, but the price was too high. The other one was lower, but did not have the qualifications met. So we got back together with the engineers and the law department, actually. Right now, that is out until the 23rd. We put a request for proposals out, which is what we should have done to begin with. So we're waiting on that. That's going to cost about $400,000. We have to get that done. That is an integral part of the rec center to get that completed. Aside from that, we're looking at replacing at least one playground, and I'd like to do that yearly. We have aging playground equipment in our parks. And I think over the next 5 or 6 years, we can get those replaced, even 2 a year, depending on how big we want to go. So a playground replacement, complete the pool. We have 5 basketball courts left to resurface, which we did 5 this year and 1 last year. After we do that, all of our basketball courts will be no older than 3 years old resurfacing. With that being said, I'd like to do that every 5 to 10 years, depending on how it is. I can tell you, I don't know when the last time all of them were done. Community Park in particular was probably done in 1998 and never resurfaced. That will be done in 2021. We have 2 aging tennis courts. As you know, we did the tennis courts at Reservoir Park along with the schools chipped in on that. We have 2 others, one at Franklin Park and one at Wampler Park. I'd like to get at least one of those done this year, if not both. The one at Wampler for sure, and it'll be 2 tennis courts, but it'll also be 4 pickleball courts outside. We did have a volunteer paint a pickleball court at the old basketball court at Lincoln Park, if you're familiar with that, on 19th Street. So we're moving forward. Pickleball is really taking off, and I don't want to get behind these other communities because some of the outdoor parks in the summer, we've been told, they're going to Canton or Akron to play. So this summer we'll be caught up. We'll have 4, and if we need to paint more other places, we can do that. That's a pretty simple thing to do. Like to resurface the Campbell walking path this year. That's long overdue. We have a couple trees along that path that we have to take out. They're damaging the path. And what we'll do, we'll plant trees in another area with a distance from the walking path. One thing I'm very excited about is community garden. The Community Garden Coalition years ago was promised a very large chunk of community park. So we talked about that, and I wasn't, not that I didn't want to give them what they were promised, but we talked, they're going to get 2 acres this year. And if you go back by the soccer field, there's an undeveloped about 8 to 10 acres in there. With that being said, we're gonna develop 2 of that for a community garden. They are going to provide the fencing for that. Along with that, we already secured sunflower seeds. We're going to plant a sunflower garden. That seems to be a pretty hot thing right now for pictures, for graduation or whatever, just to take pictures. So we're going to put probably about a ½ acre to an acre of sunflower garden back there as well. And we also received 2 acres worth of seeds for wildflowers. Those will be used around the parks. I've talked to some people, and a lot of people look at a park and they think it needs to be mowed from side to side and front to back. But adding some natural areas is not a bad thing that are out of the way, maybe off to the ends of the parks where we're not losing any acreage for ball fields or walking path. So we're going to add that as well. I'd like to add some dog park features up at the dog park. Some obstacles for the dogs to jump through and different things like that. And also picnic tables. As you go to our parks, our picnic tables are aging as well. We need to start replacing them maybe on a rotating basis every 2 or 3 years. Or the next 2 or 3 years, get them all replaced, and we should be good for quite some time. And those are the big things right now.
Thank you. Mr. Lombardi.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Pedro, I was just wondering what plans that you have for restoring any type of body of water to the reservoir.
I can tell you that's a constant conversation I have with my staff, and I've been talking to a couple contractors. If you remember, you and I spoke probably a couple months ago. I actually have a meeting over the phone with a contractor, hopefully next week, to talk about that. We've been given a price of approximately $300,000, but that was kind of I got that in 2 days to replace a pond up there, 3 to 5 acres. I'm looking at let me rephrase that. 30 to 50 acre feet is as big as we can go. So I'm thinking about a 30 acre foot. That's 3 acres surface area, say 8 to 10 feet deep in most areas. I'm going to meet with this gentleman and see what his ideas are. And we're going to continue, it might take a little while, but as you may or may not know, a lot of the grants this year were pushed back to 2021. I was told by someone that is familiar with this, and they said, ODNR is the one that made you tear down the dam. If you're going to apply for a grant with them, you better be ready, because all their grants are very competitive. And, all you can do is say, no, we're going to apply for that. But that is on the radar. It's not in the back burner. I can tell you, it's as I said, I'm going to meet next week, and if this gentleman can come through with a great plan, and I was told that he was his prices were a lot lower than what I discussed with other people. So I am going to continue to do that. I can tell you that's a constant project that I would really like to see something done, in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Lippman.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Pedro, I know that you and I have had conversation regarding pavilions in our parks in the city, and I'll say even specifically our Lincoln Park Pavilion is very, very sad. We have a dilapidated structure in that park that at this point may even be somewhat of a safety hazard. In conversations that you and I have had, there are other civic organizations in the community that are willing to assist with that type of a pavilion, and I'll say specifically for that park, but there may be others in the community that would be able to assist with pavilions in other parks that we have in the city. I guess I'm curious as to, are we still looking into having those types of structures in our parks, and also specifically the Lincoln Park.
Yes, there again, as you know, we've been working on this for what, 3 years now, and things kind of fell through a little bit and got put on the back burner. There's another thing. I think Lincoln, there are 2 or 3 other pavilions that really need to be replaced. I will tell you, we did have Lincoln inspected after they put the new roof on it, and they said it was okay, but it does need replaced. And as you know, when we talked before, the price tag of the pavilion came in extremely high. Since then, I've had 2 or 3 contractors come in, and they came in right around the same price. So I think what we need to do is, if we can get together and see exactly what, the other organizations are willing to help out with, get a firm price and move forward. We definitely need a pavilion at that park. There are a couple things that need to be done up there. Now there's a floodplain there, so we have to be careful where we put it. We definitely can't put it where it used to be because it's not handicap accessible. So I have just a plan that I made, and I'm no architect. I'd be willing to share that with you, and we can share it with others just to see what they think about it. And if we can get some people on board, I think we can do that. But we just have to do it at the right time. We need to get the right contractor in here. What I'm looking for is and don't think I want something that doesn't look good. I want, like, Community Park Pavilion is our newest, and it's almost 20 years old. So, but with that being said, I'd like our parks to have an identity and you know where you're at, but when you walk into a park and you're in Massillon, okay, you go downtown, you're in Massillon. You walk into Community Park, you're in Massillon. So if we build a pavilion in Lincoln Park, I'd like it to be similar, not necessarily exactly the same, but similar to that. A pavilion with a restroom, parking area, basketball and pickleball at the end. There's a couple different ideas, but again, I'm more than happy to speak with you in the coming weeks, and you can see where I'm coming from. And if others would like to get involved, we can sit down the first of the year and, get some people to come in and take a look at it. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you, Mr. Pedro. I certainly just didn't want it to go by the wayside. Thank you.
That's hopefully not going to happen. You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Parks and Recreation? All right. Thank you, Mr. Pedro.
You're welcome.
Ms. Katagides-Moron.
Yes, Mr. Lewis.
Do you have any statements you want to make, as this would be the last night before we take this forward for a vote?
The only statement that I have is I believe this is a fair budget. We did have to make some reductions as we do not anticipate as much revenue coming in. We tried to oblige the requests of the departments, but they were very easy to work with as they realized our situation. So I believe that this is a fair budget, and it can be executed and to the best interest of our citizens. So if anybody would have any questions on this tonight or in the next week to come, I would encourage you to give me a call. So thank you.
Councilwoman Littman?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I just wanted to, express a bit of a concern about our health department. I know since this is going to be our final conversation regarding this budget, with the pandemic being what it is, I just wanted to make sure that Ms. Argent is satisfied with the budget she's put forward, and can confirm that we are able to administer the vaccine and that we are equipped with enough personnel, exactly how we will be working this process going forward into 2021. So I didn't know if maybe she could at least have another comment or two regarding any changes that she is expecting due to now the vaccine, perhaps within the coming months, be administered through our health department.
Ms. Sargent, do you have any comments addressing those questions?
Yes, I do. Some of the legislation coming up tonight is for contract tracing and for overtime for the staff. So you'll see that as it comes up tonight. But we are getting grants. We still got another grant to be approved, and we are hopefully to get some more grants next year after the new year and see how that takes us. But we're looking at, we have hired a second contract tracer, which helps a lot. And all the staff is pitching in, and we are doing some overtime. So for now, that's taking up pretty much what we need. I hope that answers your question. Most of ours is probably going to be covered by grants next year. So that's going to be good. And right now we have 2 nurses, 2 contract tracers, some of our WIC staff, myself, and our sanitarian are all working on contract tracing. And I think we're holding it together real well. We're actually ahead of some of the other health departments in the area as far as getting caught up with everything. And with the new grants, that should help us too if we have to bring on some EMS for vaccines. And we've got our, like I said, our 2 nurses are raring to go.
Thank you, Terry.
Sure.
I'll just also add that if any expenses were to come up, obviously we have to budget. This budget is in accordance with the certificate that the auditor gives us. So if there were adjustments that would want to be made, you would be taking from another department in order to make those adjustments. If we need to fund in excess of the certificate, then we have to appropriate that in January from whatever carryover we may have. Just so that you guys are all aware, if there's something that you have in mind that you're thinking, hey, I would like to make sure this gets addressed, that might be one avenue to do so. Also, I did speak with the auditor's office in regards to the split, the capital improvements versus operating split that we normally do. The reason we have not seen legislation this year is because it's a unique situation for us, since as far back as I can remember, the split's not changing from last year. It's staying the same. So when we have legislation for the split, it's a legislation that amends an old piece of legislation to a new split. So the old legislation had one split allocation determined, and then we amend it to whatever we want. Well, since there's no change, there's no need to amend. It just continues to carry forward. So, Ms. Katagides-Boron, did you want to speak to what that split is?
Yes, the split this year, it will be 96-4, or no, 94-6. I'm sorry, I had that backwards. Such into a little panic mode there for a minute, but yes, and that is correct. It'll be the same as it was previously. So the previous year, so it'll be 94 to the general fund, 6 to capital improvements.
Thank you.
You're
Ms.
welcome.
Sterrett?
I just wanted to comment and see if I'm correct. I'm assuming we're just being conservative due to the way this year has gone, because I know we've been trying to up the split every year. So I'm assuming this year we've just decided to pull it back a little bit and be a little more conservative.
I
believe that's accurate, but also. Go ahead, Ms. Boron.
I'm sorry about that, Mr. Lewis. I do believe it also has to do with our 5-year plan that we also implemented in the past, and since this was the last year of that plan, I believe that it took the direction of staying flat from 20 to 21. I can double check on that for you if you'd like me to.
That was my same thought. I was going to say that we got through the 5-year plan. So we met our obligation according to that plan. Of course, we could always continue to move that figure, but obviously with the pandemic, you're probably right. The conservative approach is a good approach to take. Mr. Thayer?
Just a question. When did it, wasn't it a one-time years ago, like 90-10? In anybody's memory?
Possibly. I mean, that's going to predate probably anybody that's on this call. When I started, on council, it was 99 3/4 to 1/4 of a
Yeah,
percent.
that's when things were bad. Yeah. I think
So we've changed it to 94.
it seemed to me back in the 90s it was, or maybe it was late 80s that it was that way. But thank you.
Councilwoman Littman?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. My question is, what was our thought process in not moving to 7 and 93? I get being conservative with what we are going to be experiencing as far as revenue, but from what we've been told from the auditor's office, we are still expecting quite a carryover. So I guess I'm wondering, the police and fire needs as far as their fleets and so forth, as well as perhaps addressing the health department still paying rent in the old church building. I guess I'd like to see when we are able to move forward in our expected changes and continue with an additional percentage into our capital.
My thoughts in regard to that is because I would agree. My goal, and kind of Mr. Third also tipped his hat, my goal would be that we'd eventually get to the 90-10. If we were to make an adjustment now to 93.7, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Katagides-Boron, but we would have to remap the entire budget, because then that 1% has to come out of somewhere. So you'd be taking 1% out of the general fund budget and placing it into capital. So that means across the board, all those different departments and everything could end up sacrificing 1% or more, possibly more, because the courts isn't going to come off 1%. So we'd have to make up the courts 1% somewhere else. So as you can see, that would change the entire budget. Everything would have to be altered down in order to get that 1% and move it over. If that makes sense.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, Ms. Littman.
Is that something that can be addressed then? And I'm not saying in this particular budget, but perhaps in our next budget, that discussion needs to occur more sooner than later, so that if the scenario you just described is correct, that can be decided upon and then a proposed budget be submitted based on that.
Yeah, we could absolutely, when we get into late summer next year, when they're developing the budget, council can say, hey, we want to see that number move. We want to see a budget based off 93.7. And then the administration can decide if they want to present us with one that meets that request. Also, I'll say, and I know that probably sounds like a broken record, but come January, if we see capital that we want to do, and as you correctly stated, Ms. Lippman, we should have a sizable carryover. We could just use some of that if we wanted to. But you're right, that's not necessarily a long-term fix for the long-term goal.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
All right, well, this will be coming up for a vote on next Monday. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to Ms. Lord Katagides-Boron. I'm sure she'll be happy to address them. Community development.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I do have two new pieces of legislation tonight. Both are rezoning requests having to do with property on Tremont. This is the Farrell Pools property right there at the corner of Tremont and, is it Hess? I think. One of the pieces of property is right next to Farrell Pools, and the other one is, if you ever drive by there during the day, they park across the street in the grass, and it's that piece of property as well. So they're looking to rezone that from residential to business, and that was approved at the December 9th Planning Commission meeting. We do have to have, obviously, a public hearing on this piece of legislation, including the prior one that I had. I'll just speak on that one too. 2 weeks ago, the rezoning request from multifamily to single family over on Noble Place Northwest by Epworth. I spoke with Mr. Maley, and Mr. Maley also spoke with Diane, that we will probably hold these public hearings at the same time for both of these pieces of legislation. And maybe do one at like 6, one at 6:15, because we don't anticipate a lot of comment on these pieces of legislation. We just got to figure out when that will be and whether that will end up being in person or probably online, depending on numbers and things like that, COVID numbers. Mr. Maley, do you have any comments on these two new pieces of legislation?
No, I don't, Ms. Sterrett. You pretty much covered it. The only question, there was like one question whether we wanted to combine them or not. That would be whether the council would like to do that. We did do them separately, specifically because they weren't adjoining properties. Like you said, the one was across the street. I believe we do have Mike Fisher, also the owner of Farrow Pools, on the phone or on the call too.
Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
1 minute, Mr. Fisher, and I'll get to you in just a second. Council, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to combine these pieces onto one piece of legislation unless there's anybody that sees any issues with maybe possibly having one be more concerning than the other. I don't see that either of these pieces of legislation would be concerning, but what does council think? Community development members, do you see this being an issue, being on one piece of legislation? Mr. Hernkane, any comments?
I don't think I see any issues. I guess I'm just looking at the fact that they are separate, non-adjoining parcels, but I don't think that makes a difference.
We can leave them separate. I mean, it's not, I don't think it causes much of an issue. We just have to vote on them separately.
I think if you did them separate, but they included them in the same public meeting, obviously that'd be okay.
But yeah. Ms. Littman?
Yes, Mrs. Sterrett. I'm just going to ask Mr. Fisher, what does he expect to do?
I'll get to him. I was just checking first. Sorry, you're breaking up a little. I just wanted to check about the legislation pieces. I'll leave them separate, I think, just for clarity purposes, so we can vote on them each separately.
I would like them.
Mr. Fisher, if you could address City Council and just kind of tell us why you're asking for these pieces of property to be rezoned, we would appreciate that.
As most of you probably know, we've been a business in Massillon since 1957, and I bought the business from the previous owners in 2013, and we've grown beyond where we can stay in the building we're at. We plan to build a building directly to the east, which is part of the paperwork that I submitted, and we across the street will remain green space for the time being. Possible future development, say 3 to 5 years down the road.
Council members, questions for Mr. Fisher? Ms. Littman?
Thank you, Mrs. Sterrett. Mr. Fisher, the question I would have is the property that sits across the street to the north. I guess I can envision your desire to have that rezoned into business and then selling it with the new rezoning. Is that something that you are looking to do in the future? You said 3 to 5 years of future development, or is that your own future development you're referring to?
That would be my own future development. As you know, property is a premium, and for our business to stay where it's at, we want to keep the business in Massillon. We have no desire to go anywhere else, but we just are landlocked to the point where we are bursting at the seams where we're at. And I can envision us, building another building there in the future.
Ms. Littman, continue.
Thank you, Mrs. Sterrett. Since you are in a residential area, have you had any conversations with the residents that are in the area regarding your thoughts and expansion?
Yes, ma'am. We sent out to everyone within 300 feet of both properties. We sent and had a community meeting, and no one showed up to the meeting. I don't think there's going to be any impact on the community there. We've got a substation right next door, They've got other Holder Bombs are next to us, which is another business as well, and our retail business has been there as well. And we've flourished there, and we just I went door to door with people that were directly impacted, adjacent to both these properties, and no one had any objection to it whatsoever.
Are you expanding your FTEs in your business since you are expanding the building and so
Oh
forth?
yes, yeah, we're up to 22 employees, during the height of the season, and we can see that we can see that growing to probably in the future 40 employees.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Gregg?
Thank you, Mrs. Sterrett. Mr. Fisher, I was just a question regarding the property directly to your east that's adjacent to your existing building. Are you looking to build an entire new structure or to add on to your existing structure?
An entire new structure. There would be no continuation of the building there. We're submitted with our thing to the council. We have a drawing, a rendering of the building we want to build is actually in that. It's a 40 by 80 warehouse type building with 4 garage doors.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Maley, we did not get that rendering through our legislation request. So if you could get that and send that along through council, I think everybody would just be interested in seeing what the plans are for the future on that.
I can do that.
Thank you. Mr. Ferret?
Yeah, I think I understand the property you want is north across Tremont. Be the second property.
There is one across Tremont that's north of us, of our existing retail location. And then we have a place directly east of, adjacent to our retail location.
Okay.
That's where we wanted to do building right now, is directly east of the existing building. Where there used to be a house there. I bought the property with a house that was mold infested and tore it down.
Mr. Ferret, if you look at the map that is included, it's the 2 white highlighted areas on the black and white map that we got with the legislation request. The one next door and then the one across the street. It's 2 separate parcels. They're looking to rezone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions from council members? Thank you, Mr. Fisher, for your input. I will give my verbal approval for these 2 pieces of legislation. And then after this one is given first reading, I will get with Mr. Maley and with Ms. Rowland to schedule the public hearing for these legislations, and then for the legislations for the multifamily to single family over on Noble Place, the Northwest. Any questions or any concerns on those pieces?
I give my verbal.
Verbal as well.
I have nothing further.
Environmental.
Nothing from environmental.
Health and welfare.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I believe Mr. Hernkane had some information he wanted to share with us about animal control. Mr. Hernkane?
Thank you, Mr. Lombardi. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was a really good conversation. I think right now we just have a lot of options to look at, and basically it boils down to, what do we as a council feel is the appropriate course of action to address this concern in some way, shape, or form here for our residents and their safety for themselves, their property, and the animals, theirs and in the community. Obviously, before we we had a full-blown animal control officer in the city, and that encompasses a great deal. The animal control position, as it was, has got many parts to it. It's a dog warden, it's an animal trapper, it's a game warden concerning wildlife. It's a police officer to the degree that there's certain enforcement and investigation powers, especially in concerns to cruelty to animal cases, which are misdemeanors of the second degree, I believe. Some of our options are, we've talked about maybe looking at this as an administrative position, whether full-time. I think there was some support for part-time. A lot of those services that kind of are encompassed in the animal control wheel, so to speak. I mean, there's, we could look at hiring our own dog warden here in the city, maybe on a part-time basis. We could look at maybe contracting with the sheriff's office for a year or so to see if we can have a dog warden from their department come over here. We can outsource or contract the trap, neuter, and return component of it when it comes to feral cats. Obviously, I think there's a serious code compliance, or at least a significant code compliance part to this, where an administrative employee that maybe not a police officer that could issue citations on minor misdemeanors, and if they're cited under the city code, we would get the revenue for that as opposed to the Ohio Revised Code. We could also look at this more as, I think the question is, do we want to look in terms of provision of services or maybe coordination of services with minimal provision? The card that was created this year, I think kind of lends itself to someone to implement to some degree. We could look at a part-time employee for the administration that would serve as maybe code compliance on animal codes, and kind of be the resource for the community to contact, be the point of contact on animal concerns, and let that person kind of study it and look and maybe give us further direction on what exactly the needs are. Basically, there's some options on the table. There's multiple ways to do this. I think it depends on the willingness of council to kind of voice their opinions on what they feel is the right course of action, because I don't believe the way we're currently on is going to be sufficient.
Mr. Lombardi, the mayor, may I address?
Yes, Mayor. Could you hold 1 second? I just want to make sure that Mrs. Creamer doesn't have any comments.
Sure.
For the committee. Thank you.
I have no comments at this time, Mark.
All right. Mayor Perry, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Council, Madam President. I just wanted to let you know that it is working very well right now. We talked about this before, and our police officers are now trained. They're a 24/7 operation. They take the calls and they address them. Our code enforcement, and I do have Jim Johnson on the line tonight as well. Our code enforcement is working with our police department for any code violations, any feral cats, excuse me. And it's working very well. And if you move to ask us to hire someone, that person is going to need to take vacation. They're going to need days off. They're going to have limited hours. And right now we have 24/7 with our police officers. The chief of police thinks it's working well. The code enforcement is working well with our staff at the police department. And you cannot utilize CDBG dollars just for the target area. That really is compounding issues when you try to do that. So I just wanted to let you know that, the process is working well now. Yes, Mark has called me a couple of times and I've been able to step in. We work with our partners very well with the excuse me, I'm trying to think of all the names of the Humane Society, Jackie, and it's really called an organizational structure that we have. The dog warden is part of that organizational structure, the police department, the Humane Society, and our code enforcement officers. You know, we discussed this at length with my team, and you know, we're not seeing any issues. Jimmy has done an excellent job with a lot of feral cats. He's handled many issues that you aren't even aware of, and he's done an excellent job also. We also have an additional expense with a van, and then the cages that we need. And this person that works in code cannot carry a weapon. And the person that was working was underneath the police department. And so there's an issue there as well. So we are not looking to make any changes at the administrative level. And we want to work with council, but honestly, you know, these type of conversations are made between me and the council members. And so I'm not sure what an animal officer person could do other than what we're doing right now. And if someone could convince me of that, we would make the change. But we've looked at all these different situations, and we don't need to contract with the dog warden because our officers are doing that job now. So if someone can bring up some things that is not happening, please let us know. But my office is not getting calls for these type of issues. And if they do, Mark is calling me and we get them handled. The feral cat issue, as long as you're feeding those cats, you're going to have feral cats. The way to stop having feral cats is to stop feeding them. One lady was cited because she kept feeding them, and she was brought into court, and she admitted that she was feeding the cats. The way to get rid of feral cats is stop feeding them. So with that, I'll leave that open for council discussion, but my team has discussed it completely, thoroughly. And we believe that what we have in place right now is working. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.
Does anyone else have any other comments or questions? Okay. And that would be it for health and
Mr.
welfare.
Lombardi,
Yes, Mr. Henke.
I'd like to make one comment on that. As the mayor stated, that Jimmy Johnson has done things that we don't even know about. I think that's kind of part of the problem. If we don't know about them, the community probably doesn't know about them. If the mayor feels that this plan is sufficient, and if we have the police officer resources to handle these calls, and there's things that we don't know about that have occurred, maybe I would suggest that she kind of roll this out into some type of public conversation or something with the newspaper so that the community knows what the administration's approach is to this, because if she feels that that is working, then maybe it does work. I don't know, but I think I guess I would ask her to maybe roll that out into some press release or maybe something with the Independent so the community knows what the administration is doing and how the process works.
Mr. Lombardi, we have, we'll be happy to give council updates. No one ever requests us to give an update on this. But Megan Sterrett can tell you from her area, she's worked with us. We've had great results. I don't know, Megan, would you like to talk about that?
Yes, Mayor, I've actually, and I've brought it up before, I've emailed Barb and the mayor's office twice recently with issues. One was not a animal control issue, but the other one was. And both times issues were handled promptly and quickly from the mayor's office. And citizens did contact me to say they were very satisfied with results. So it has been working in that regard, yes.
I do have one comment, however, on the feral cat situation. We had a neighborhood where the residents had to take care of their own feral cat colonies for the TNR. And it seemed like they weren't getting any response out of the city. And I'm not sure what the details were about that, other than what I saw in the newspaper. Can someone speak to that?
They've never called our office, Mark. You know, you know yourself, when you call me, I answer any time of the day or night. And then I handle the concern. You know this.
I agree.
They never called us, and I think they took it upon themselves to do this. And some people, they are doing that in communities. They are creating not-for-profits, and they're doing this, and my hats are off to them. You know, and they're welcome to do that. When I had an issue with my daughter, I didn't really call Department of DD. I handled it myself. I started a special needs child care center and created a not-for-profit. And so people are welcome to do that, and we welcome them to do that. And if they would reach out to us, we'd be happy to work with them as well. And I know Jimmy would, as well as our police officers. We have an outstanding working team in the city of Massillon, and we really collaborate and partner with anything that we can. So, you know, have them give me a call, and I'll be happy to sit down and talk with them and include Jimmy and the chief and Barb. But we've not heard from that group, Mark.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Mr. Hernkane?
Well, this is on a different subject. Is that okay?
I believe Mrs. Littman might be wanting to speak about animal control. So,
very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardi. I just wanted to mention regarding the comment that no one asks for an update. When we originally were speaking of the animal control officer through the police department, I'm pulling out my folder here, that was discussed June 15th. And it was determined at that point that we would have a 120-day follow-up, which was requested from Mrs. Sylvester on October 15th. She gave us an update on October 26th and discussed even further as to how the police were handling the calls that they were receiving. So I guess I just wanted to clarify that we did have discussion in council, and we requested an update, and we did receive an update from Barbara, again, like I said, on October 26th. We've not requested another.
It looks like Mrs. Littman was knocked off the system. Any other questions regarding animal control? Mr. Hernkane, you had another comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lombardi. I received a call from a resident in Ward 3 in the Perry Schools area. And I guess I have a question if Mrs. Argent is still on the phone, or if the mayor or the safety service director can answer how this process works. Basically, her child tested positive, and I guess she called the Massillon Health Department because she lives in the city, although it's Perry local schools, to get a release or something from the health department. And they said they only fax or email them to the Massillon City Schools, and that she would have to come down to the department since it was the Perry local schools. I'm just curious if anyone can clarify that process.
This is Terry. Yeah, I don't know what that would be. We do the entire city of Massillon. That's who we give releases for. So I don't know what happened there. I really don't know.
Because the only reason she called me and she said, you know, we were told that we have to come down and physically get it because we don't send it. We only fax or send it to the Massillon City Schools. You have to come down and pick it up. She said, well, we're in quarantine. And they still made her come down. She waited in line and stuff like that. So I don't know if I've not heard of that before. I guess that's just an FYI that's a call I received.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know about that situation. Now, we can't fax medical information through the fax, but if they come down here, or we also mail those out. So there was a way for her to get it. So I don't really know the situation. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Carrie, do you want to give them your number, the health department number to call if they have a concern like that? Council, give council.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's 330-830-1711. And that's for any kind of COVID issue at all.
Mr. Lewis, I guess that's all for health and welfare. Thank you.
Parks and Rec,
I have nothing, Mr. Lewis.
Police and Fire,
Can you hear me?
we can now.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm having some connection issues, I guess here. No, I do not have anything for police and fire. I did want to just finish my comment from previously. I just wanted to say that when we had discussed animal control previously, it was done in June, and then again, follow-up occurred on October 15th.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Littman. Public utilities.
Nothing from public utilities.
Rules and courts.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lewis. I do have an item. Hopefully, Steve Pedro is still on the line. Bring it up here. Request for legislation from Parks and Recreation. Recreation Center new calculation sheets for minimum wage increase. They requested to amend ordinance number 1, 2018. Measure was approved and by the Recreation Board 5-0 in the December 2nd, 2020 meeting. And does have language, emergency language, the reason Recreation Center new calculation sheets for minimum wage increase. They want to, I'm assuming they want to implement these quickly. So Mr. Pedro, are you still on the line and would like to discuss this?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Gregg. As he said, this is an amendment to ordinance number 1, 2018. When we did this then, we didn't accommodate, we didn't account for another wage increase for minimum wage. As you know, that comes out in November. So that's why the emergency language is on here. Our minimum wage, or I'm sorry, labor 1, this is the only one we're asking to change right now. Labor 1 only goes up to $8.70. And then for whatever reason, when this was created, it starts labor 2 at $9. So I would like to move this to $8.95 to at least accommodate the year 2021. And we will look into this in the year 2021 for the future to accommodate future minimum wage increases as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pedro. Are there any questions, comments? All right, I will plan to give my verbal to add this to the agenda for next meeting.
I'll give my verbal, Megan Starrett.
Hearn Kane verbal.
All right, thank you. That's and that is all for rules and courts.
Streets and highways.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lewis. There's actually two pieces here you'll see, and I would defer to Mr. Popeil to fill us in a little bit. It looks like there's someone's going to, is there housing there, or they want to start housing development, but they need a service alley down on the southeast side. Mr. Popeil, would you fill us in a little bit on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Actually, both these pieces of property, are owned by Habitat for Humanity. They're both going to be, lot consolidations, so they can, build a home on it. And, it's just a general lot, consolidation plat, but both of them were kind of unique properties as there's a, unnamed alley in the rear, of both, and then one is bordered by Glenwood and the other by Third. And both streets actually kind of impose on the property, so they're dedicating, starting with the first one on Glenwood. Currently, it's only a 15-foot right-of-way. Standard alley width is 20, so they're gonna give us another 5 feet. So we're gonna accept right-of-way on that, as well as the rear unnamed alley. That currently is 15 foot in width for the right-of-way, and they're gonna give us another 5. And you can kind of see on the plat, if you look at it, you can kind of, the surveyor drew the, edge of pavement, and you can see how it was in their property, but, with the new consolidation and them giving us 5 feet, now we can access our pavement without going on the property like what they have to do now. The first one is pretty straightforward, the Glenwood and the non-named alley, and the second one, if you want me to hit it real quick, is the same thing. They're gonna dedicate that rear alley to us. It runs through there right now. They're gonna give us the 20 foot there, and then on Third Street, as you head up toward Woodland, it was actually existing right now. It's kind of like a flag lot, with only 2.5 feet, kind of a real weird looking, lot. 2.5 feet running all the way up to Woodland. So, they're gonna dedicate that 2.5 to Third Street right away, just to save confusion and make it more standard. So both lots are simple consolidation, and where the pavement was butting on the lot, they're gonna give us another 5 feet right away. So we are accepting the consolidation as well as the dedication.
Thank you, Mr. Popeil. That helps. That the map's kind of small to
Yeah.
get all that in there. So, but I appreciate that help. Any questions from Streets and Highways Committee? Comments? Slipman?
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. My question is for Mr. Popeil. Who is the they you're speaking of? You're saying they are giving this
Oh,
to,
I'm sorry, that's Habitat for Humanity. They're consolidating the two lots that they own, and they're gonna dedicate the extra right away to us. So Habitat.
thank you.
Anyone else? On council? Well, then, Diane, I'd like to give my verbal for both of these pieces then to for next week.
I will give my verbal as well. Linda Littman.
I will give my verbal. Jill Creamer.
Thank you.
And Mr. Lewis, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Thayer. All right, finance. The first piece I have is the old. It was the transfer that we had, or it was related. I'm sorry, not a transfer. It was the transfer related to the TIF that we just gave second reading to. I did get clarification. What this is, well, we have someone from the auditor's office that might be able to explain it better than I do. Are you still on?
Yes, I am.
Are you familiar with what I'm referencing?
Yeah, you're talking about the 3109 fund.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that is money that that is just money that we have to pay out to LCR Meadows and the Target Plaza. It's just a trust account where we receive the money from the county and then we hold it there till we pay it out to LCR Meadows. So we already have the money and now we just need to pay it out.
Thank you for finding the words that I was struggling to find. Does anyone have any questions? That's up for second reading. The intention would be to go ahead and put that forward for passage on Monday. New request we have one coming from the health department. It is appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the Community Health Services Fund, $17,000 in grant expenses. Ms. Argent, is there anything you want to add to this?
No, this is for grant expenses. The one good part about this will be completely reimbursed. This is for equipment, computers and things like that, but it will be 100% reimbursed by our COVID grant.
Thank you. I give my verbal.
Verbal, Megan Starrett.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare an ordinance to appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the local coronavirus fund to the following account: $89,713.41. This is needed for money to be received from a sub-grant agreement from the Stark County to be used for related expenses. Ms. Myers, is this the one that I think I spoke to the auditor? What is the time frame on spending this money?
We need to spend it by December 31st, 2020.
And we are and this is to be used per the agreement that we received in our email for law enforcement or first responder pay.
Correct.
Anyone have any questions? I give my verbal.
Megan Starrett, verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you. Ed, I have a quick question.
Yes.
There's another one, request for legislation in here for the auditor to sign and accept the sub-grant. Should that come first before we make any appropriations out of it?
Yes, it should.
Okay.
I give my verbal on that piece as well.
Thank you.
Starrett, verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions about either one of those pieces? I don't want it to sound like we're just breezing through those. All right, thank you. If something comes up, please bring them up Monday. Please prepare legislation to appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the Park and Rec to the following accounts: 25,000 grant expenses. This is Senior Center will be receiving a relief funding grant from the state of Ohio. The grant funds must be spent by 12/30/20. Mr. Pedro, did you want to speak to this at all? He may have left. I'm assuming it's going to be very similar to the other one. We'll get additional information.
I'm here, Ed. I'm sorry. I had myself muted.
Did you want to speak to that?
I'll just give you the information on it. On October 21st, we were notified that we could apply for some funding for the senior center, not knowing how much or what was available. I can tell you there was no communication until 12/1. We were notified that we were going to receive $25,000. We have to spend that by the end of the year, by the 30th. We have a couple ideas, or we have a couple estimates. We're going to put new restroom doors, automatic restroom doors on the first floor, and 2 new bottle filler drinking fountains. And we have a little bit more that I sent an inquiry in to find out what was approved and disapproved, or what other projects that may be approved. And I got an email today, and it's pretty broad, so we're working on a couple other things, and we're going to get that done here in the next week.
Anyone have any questions? I give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
All right,
Thank
now we
you.
have a series of reduction and appropriations. Ms. Rowland, I would assume that we can do a super bundle on these unless someone objects.
Well, I was hoping you'd say that.
So please prepare an ordinance to reduce appropriations in the police pension fund by $20,968.98. This is the zero out for the fund year. And that's what a bunch of these reductions are. So we'll continue to go through them, but I give my verbal.
Verbal, Starrett.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank
And
you.
since there's a few of these, I'll kind of read them off and give my verbal, but please unmute yourself, yell at me if you have a question, because I might not see you if I'm not looking up the whole time. Please prepare an ordinance to reduce appropriations in the fire pension by $3,991.47, and that is to zero out the fund for year end. I give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare an ordinance to reduce appropriations in the state patrol transfer in the following accounts. You're going to reduce state patrol transfer law library by $11,266.99. State patrol refund to general by the same amount for a total of $22,533.98. And this is to zero out for year end. I give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare an ordinance to reduce appropriations in the Massillon Museum Fund, the holdings account by $4,281.26, fees by $2,462.02, for a total of $6,743.28. Again, to zero out the fund for year end. I give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Prepare an ordinance to reduce appropriation in the municipal road fund by $49,951 Erie Street South resurfacing project. Ms. Katagides Boron. Or anyone from the administration, actually.
This is Stephanie from the auditor's office. That's another zero count, and they don't plan on doing any more work with that this year. So they won't be getting any more money in for that.
And then we would just reappropriate for next year if they need it to complete anything that might remain on that project.
Correct.
Ms. Kramer?
Well, I mean, I may be wrong. Maybe is Jason on here? I think that project I thought was completed, Erie Street. So was that additional funds that was not used? Are those funds going to be able to be used for another project? Another road project?
All right, I understand the spirit of this legislation. We're gonna have to look into that, Ms. Kramer, because I know we looked at South Erie for a long time. I want to make sure that the money we have there was used and that project is in fact complete. But I'll give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Another reduction in the wastewater treatment plant by $1,662,868.97, and that's the upgrade project. This one gets done every year. It just continues to be moved forward to the next year as they continue to work through the project. Any questions, though? I give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Hey, Ms. Rowland, I'll just tell you right now, you might want to talk to the auditor, but I'm willing to bet that last one, she might take issue with if you bundle.
The 1 million?
Yeah, because of it being an enterprise account or coming from the
Okay.
wastewater treatment plant, sometimes they like to treat that separately.
Okay. Not a problem.
All right, another one. Request authorization from the Massillon City Health Department to accept an addendum to a previously accepted COVID-19 grant with the Stark County Combined General Health District. The last through. Is this the one we already discussed, Ms. Rowland? The addendum?
No, this is for the health department.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Argent, did you have anything you wanted to speak to this?
No, this is just an addendum to a previously accepted grant, and they'd like to give us another $81,459. And this is pretty much targeted for vaccination needs for setting up vaccination clinics, for equipment for remote work for vaccination clinics. We're looking at a tent, tables, chairs, a couple extra computers, laptops to take out in case we can do an outside drive-through clinic. And that's pretty much it.
Does anyone have any, Ms. Lippman?
Terry, I would ask, you are getting quite a bit of funding into the health department for the COVID issues. My concern is having enough people to, or not, overextending the people that we do have to complete all of the tasks that are associated with the pandemic. And you just said too, that all of the additional duties. I guess I just want to make sure that if we're spending some of these dollars on tents and tables and chairs and so forth, that we shouldn't be using some of those dollars toward additional personnel.
That's right. That's a good question. Part of that is going to overtime for the staff that we have, and also to hire temporary people for vaccine clinics. We're looking at temporary security and possibly temporary additional vaccinators such as EMS and possibly some more nurses. So this is definitely going to help our staffing needs.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare legislation to accept a state of the Ohio Coronavirus Relief Funding Grant for the Adult Day Services in Ohio Senior Center. This is the one you're talking about. Through the Parks and Rec. Mr. Pedro, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
No, I do not. This is just to accept the grant.
Oh my goodness. All right.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I'm having technical difficulties on my side. All right. Let me see if I got, okay. The next one, please prepare legislation authorizing the Massillon to extend the offer to all city employees who are eligible for healthcare benefits for another 2 years. Mr. Pedro, this is the benefit that we have where the city employees are able to go to the rec center for free, correct?
Yes, all city employees who are on our health care plan receive a single membership for a single, and then if they would like to purchase the family membership, they would pay the difference.
Okay.
Ed,
And how many
Can
use
I-
it currently? Go ahead, Miss
sorry?
Rowland.
Yeah, I don't believe, or either I missed it. I don't believe you gave me verbals on the
Oh.
adult daycare services and the senior citizens.
Thank you. I give my verbal.
Okay.
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Pedro, how many people are currently using this offer of a free membership to the rec center?
In 2020, there were 69 employees. Half of those then purchased a family membership.
Any additional questions? All right, I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Hi, Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare legislation authorizing the auditor of Massillon, Ohio to accept a Stark County sub-grant agreement from the Coronavirus and Release and Economic Securities Act on behalf of the City of Massillon. The City of Massillon portion of this sub-grant is $89,713.
You already gave verbals on that one.
Yeah, we gave this verbals. Anybody have any questions about it, though? Nope. All right. All right, please prepare legislation authorizing the mayor of the City of Massillon, Ohio to approve a one-year prisoner transport agreement between the City of Massillon and the political subdivisions using the city's prisoner transport service, and authorizing the Auditor of the City of Massillon, Ohio, deposit said funds into the 1100 General Fund and then Capital Improvement Fund, effective January 21, and declare an emergency. And this is to allow the contract to take effect January 2021. Does anybody have any questions? The contract is attached. Ms. Littman.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I just wanted to confirm with Ms. Rowland that at the top of each one of these contracts, it indicates Massillon City and Jackson Township on every one of them versus the actual community or city that it is referring to in its body. We've got Canal Fulton, we've got Beach City, we've got all of these that are attached, Lawrence Township, but at the title of every one of these contracts says Jackson Township. I'm guessing that's incorrect.
You would be correct, and that would be through Barb Sylvester. She submitted the request for legislation.
Yes, Mrs. Littman, we can correct those. That was worked up through the police department and went to our law department as well. So, but it is for each individual one, but we can amend those and change the top title.
Okay, thank you. I think they should be.
Yes, thank you for catching that.
You're welcome.
It drove me nuts as well, Ms. Littman.
That's correct on the
All
first
right,
on the
so
first
let me scroll
contract, but
through
never the
them.
other.
Yeah, I thought I was reading things wrong at first. So, all right, I'll give my verbal for that. Have we done?
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank
All
you.
right. Request legislation authorizing the Director of Public Safety and Service to the City of Massillon, Ohio to exercise the option to renew for the 4th year under the term of the agreement, originally effective January 1 of 13 with Kimball. So this is our trash and recycling. I believe we have the option for 5 years that we can renew, and we're renewing the 4th year right now. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Lewis, that is correct.
And they're increasing a little bit, 2.3% increase.
Yes, the only adjustment that is made is for the consumer price index adjustment, which was in the agreed in the original agreement.
So just to show in this agreement, that would take unlimited service with recycling from $12.65 per month to $12.94 per month. So just so you know. Does anybody have any questions regarding this? I will say that public utilities or environmental, you might want to look at this and just think that, you know, this time next year, we will be entering our 5th renewal, and then you might want to start thinking about what do we do after we run out of renewals, because at that point, it runs out. All right, we're into transfers now. From the administration, they, yes.
Verbals?
Oh, verbal, sorry. I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
I'm off my game today, Miss Rowland.
It's okay. It happens.
Hey, it's 8 o'clock. It's about 30 minutes away from my bedtime. So that's my
Oh, I
excuse.
thought you were in a hurry to get to go watch the game.
Well, maybe, you know, on the radio or something. I don't know. Anyways. Administration transfer, city state collection fees reduction by 5,000, placing that into improvement projects. This transfer is needed to complete emergency demolition of unsafe structure located at 878 Walnut Road Southeast. I spoke with the safety service director on Friday about this. This is a project that they've been looking at for quite a while. From what I understand, Ms. Creamer's worked with some neighborhood members who have been very concerned about this and was able to help the administration identify this need. So this is needed in order to rectify this situation. Are there any questions? All right, I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Economic Development, county, state collection fees reduction by 15,000, putting it in a transfer advance out. To realign the 2020 budget to pay economic development grants to Legacy Project at 708 Tremont Southwest and Justin Lepley. Is this the one that's been hanging out for a while, Ms. Rowland?
Yes.
All right, I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Health Department, reduction of salary, $10,739.24. Reduction in workers' comp, $3,260 by 76 cents. And putting the grants expense account for a total of $14,000. This is to realign the budget to pay grant expenses by 12/31/2020 as stated by the grant guidelines. I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Parks and Rec, workers' comp reduction by $2,085, placing it into PERS, and bank charges legends to realign the budget. Any questions? I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Police Department, reduced salary in police by 41,000, placing it into overtime paid and safety equipment to provide for shortages in the account and to replace expired ballistic vests. A portion of the amount for expired ballistic vests will reimburse from the state. Any questions? I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Fire Department, reduction in salary by $924.70, placing it into uniform allowance. And this is to realign the budget to pay for fire uniform allowance due for fiscal year 2020. I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
And that is all we have for finance. Any other discussion points this evening? At this point, I would like to open up the meeting to public comment. Anyone in the attendance that is from the public that would like to address City Council may do so at this time. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. And as you begin to speak, please state your name and address. You may proceed now. All right, seeing no additional comments, I would just say go Browns tonight. Hope we may get a 10-game win season. I don't know. I don't even know what that looks like for us. So there we go. And with that, everybody have a good evening. We'll see you guys next week.
Good night.
Right.